Everybody. Very much appreciate the invitation and opportunity to speak to you today about accessible tourism among aging and disabled travelers. This is a very unique and important market when talking about the touristic offer, promotion, but also when thinking about tourism, wellness, security, safety issues. So what I will speak about today is a bit about defining accessible tourism so that you understand a bit more about what accessible tourism is, what it entails, and why it meets the needs of aging and disabled travelers. I will also discuss accessible tourism in the context of a social approach, about inclusion, and also a bit more about the built environment and how we can modify the built environment to be more accommodating and welcoming of these individuals. Additionally, I will show a lot of photographs, but I will show opportunities of how to improve the tourism experience for those who are aging and those who are traveling with disabilities through community capacity development. That collaboration, cooperation between many different organizations and sectors in a community to make sure that they can accommodate the needs and desires of this unique population. Now, I am a public health expert, and I do a lot in aging, so I always like to talk a little bit about public health and just give you a little bit of perspective about the context of why aging and disability is so important and why there are so many individuals who are traveling with these two characteristics. When we talk about health, we talk about a multidimensional state, not just the physical, not just talking about disease, but we also talk about the mental and the intellectual, the emotional, the spiritual, very complex, very holistic types of individuals that comprise health. When we talk about health, we think of this as a spectrum, a lot of balance. What is healthy for one person may not be considered healthy for another. And we have to better understand a person's health if we're going to better accommodate them and their needs. Well, that advanced quite quickly. My apologies. Try one more time. All right. But what we often have is a constant challenge. There are many different causes and behaviors that influence health. There's a lot of different contexts, and we'll talk about some of those. Because health and a person's abilities and disabilities are very complex, that means our approaches to accommodate these travelers, our abilities to provide them with these services and the equipment and the resources they need also have to be very diverse and very much shared from many community sectors. In public health, we talk about improving and protecting the individual, and this is very true also in tourism. When we talk about tourism wellness, we talk about tourism security and safety issues. And therefore, we have to be very adaptive and reactive. We have to make sure that what we have in our communities is responsive to the people coming to our communities, to our destinations. But we also have to realize that as that changes, we also have to change alongside it. Individuals don't just exist by themselves, there's many layers of influence. And when we talk about a community, we talk about these different layers of influence. It's not just the individual and their health, as I described, but it's also the people that they interact with, their families, their friends, the individuals at the airport, the police, the fire, the hotel, many of these different individuals that they interact with. But we also talk a lot about the organizations, those different entities that interact with and serve those travelers who may be aging and disabled. And then the community, those connections between all of the different organizations that create a network of different organizations and agencies that will then be able to communicate and serve the different types of individuals and their special and unique needs. And of course, policy. Without policy, we see that we cannot make big changes. The best way to change a community or multiple individuals simultaneously is to pass policy. And what we see is that to pass policy influences the community and the organizations and the people, but also the people and those that they interact with influence the organizations, the community, and the policy. So it goes up and down. But you may ask, why is this important? When people are traveling, we have to realize that their health is comprised of many different aspects. It is not only their genetics and talking about their aging, talking about the reasons they have or do not have certain conditions. We talk about the physical environment, the built environment, the infrastructures, the streets, the buildings. Oftentimes in the promotions, in the attractions of an area, this is oftentimes the built environment. But it's more than that, it's also the social environment. We have a lot talking about the culture and the climate of the area that starts to influence a bit of a person's health, the way they are, the way they act, the behaviors they engage in. We talk about healthcare, and this is extremely important, especially when a person is traveling and away from home. We need to know that they have the different types of resources, the different types of facilities, ways that they can address their needs while away, but also personal behavior. Because when people travel, they oftentimes do things, they want to do things that they may not typically do. Hence, that is why they travel oftentimes. And there's many different ways. But what we realize is that all of these areas, each of these determinants of health, are extremely important, and they shape an individual. They overlap, and they also create a need to understand the person and their environment. That dynamic interplay between the person and the places that they are. And therefore, by having safer places, accommodating people with your promotion, with your attractions, with your services, your equipment, your policies, you can also start to address their unique needs. And here's another depiction of how we see the individual existing within all of these different spheres and layers of influence about who they are and why they are existing where they are. And what I like about this most is that there's the living and working conditions. Because when a person comes to your destination, to your city, to your country, they oftentimes will then start to experience what it is that you have to offer. And this is a figure that we've developed, that we think about all of these things about the individual's health and all of those things about the different influences in the community and the organizations. But we realize that individuals in context are shaped by their environment, where they live, where they've been living. And we see that not only the cultural and the environmental and the economic situations influence who they are and why they travel and what they want to do, but also the basic infrastructure for everybody and the tourism infrastructure. But what we see is that then they come to the destination. They come to us, and they're already shaped by these things. But now they have certain expectations. They have certain types of needs. They have certain types of wants that are also then defined and influenced by what we have in our area. It's our culture, in our environment, in economic situations, and the different structures that we have. So I hope that was a little bit of context about who these individuals are, but let's talk about the modern tourist. Who is it who's coming to our destinations based on their age and their disabilities? What we see is that age and disability are very highly related. Oftentimes individuals who are older have more disabilities, but they're not always hand in hand or connected. What we see is that the global population is aging, and it's increased dramatically from about 600 million people in 2000 to over 2 billion people being over the age of 60 to 65 by the year 2050. That is a huge, large market. And we do know that these individuals have unique needs. They have chronic conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, cancers. And we see these more and more in older adults. But they also have multiple of these conditions that act simultaneously. This influences their needs while they're visiting. They may have certain types of regimens, certain types of medications, certain types of activities, certain types of professionals that they need to interact with. And now oftentimes they will make those provisions, but oftentimes they rely on us, the tourism, the destination, to link them with these services if they have not done so already. What we see also is that about 60% of the global wealth is held by people who are over age 60 to 65. And that those individuals account for about 40% of all spending. Meaning this is a market that, if overlooked, is a missed opportunity for not only promoting your destination, but also a missed opportunity to protect them while they're with us, because these individuals have a lot of time, they oftentimes are more affluent, and they want to see different parts of the world. So they're going to travel, and we need to recognize and acknowledge that these people will be coming to our areas, and that these people need to be accommodated with different types of policies, services, resources, equipment. When we talk about disabilities, we say about approximately 10% of the global population has some form of disability. And these disabilities can range from many different physical or cognitive, also vision and hearing. But we know that about 8% of the international tourists are also in this disabled population. And this is very important because that number is growing, and it's growing alongside older adults, aging populations. And so we see that the possible market could be upwards of about 80 million people who meet this need and therefore need special services. And there it goes again. Apologies. Maybe I'm... When you get there. This is impressive. It just wants to do wherever it wants to go. I hit the button once, and it likes to go multiple times. My apologies. Thank you very much while I deal with technology. And so here, disability defined. Hopefully it will stay there for long enough. We talk about physical and mental conditions that limit a person's movements, their senses, or their activities. And oftentimes a disability is recognized by a law or some sort of regulating agency, and there are many. We do know that these conditions with disabilities can be in many different conditions, and they change over the life course. Some of them can be chronic, meaning that they exist over time and will never go away, such as a paralysis. We also know that some may be more temporary, like an injury. And we also know some that are progressing, meaning they get worse over time, like degenerative eyes or hearing loss. So we have to be able to understand a bit more about who is coming to our destinations. And we know that it's not just the hearing and the vision, it's not just the physical, it's also the cognitive. Those individuals who might have Alzheimer's, different types of dementia, who need additional services. And so historically, we also know that these individuals have been disenfranchised. They have been marginalized, and they have also been overlooked. And this also calls in many different concepts of human rights, social justice, things that need to be addressed and should be addressed in our areas. So when we talk about tourism, we all know what tourism is, but we realize that there's different degrees of tourism, different purposes of why a person comes to a destination, whether it's for personal or business, something professional. But we also know that the individuals may come as an excursionist, meaning they come for the same day, one day, and then they leave. Or they may come as overnight visitors, meaning that they come for extended periods of time. And what we see with this is that the needs of the individual may change based on the length of stay, the purpose of their trip, and how much they engage with the community. Oftentimes we think about our own destinations, our own businesses, who it is that we serve and cater to. But for example, in a hotel setting, it might not just be that they come to the hotel. It's that they want to visit the surrounding areas and all of the other businesses. So we talk a lot about connectivity and those different structures and resources, services, and we'll get into some of those here shortly. When we talk about disabled travelers, a very unique and special market because approximately 71% of travelers with disabilities travel with other people. They travel with family members or friends, or they travel with assistants, people who are trained to provide services and meet their needs. Meaning that these individuals, when they come to a destination, come with others. And that is a great opportunity to consider when meeting their needs, because it might be that they come with more money, more spending, and have multiple other types of needs that they need for multiple different types of people, traveling in groups. And what we see is that on average, an individual with some sort of disability spends about 25% more than a person without a disability when they travel. So we get into accessible tourism. Accessible tourism enables people with access requirements to function independently with equity and dignity throughout the delivery of universally designed products, services, and environments. And you see the word universal. This means that the participation and inclusion of the different locations, attractions, activities are not limited to any people based on their age or their disability or their functional status. And we see oftentimes when thinking about accessible tourism, these concepts of designs for all or universal designs come into play. So that it's not that there are separate features, but rather the features in place can accommodate everybody, all simultaneously. So as defined by the European Network for Accessible Tourism, we see that there are many different policies and practices that are recommended for a destination. We talk about barrier-free destinations, meaning that those infrastructures, those facilities are accommodating and welcoming of all individuals, again, despite their functional status or their abilities. It means that they're welcome, they can visit, and they're not isolated. We talk about transportation, meaning that from the time they arrive to the time they get to the hotel, from the airport or from the sea or by land, however they're traveling, that they're able to get there in a way that meets their needs. When they get to the destination, they have all of the equipment and resources they need. And also making sure that wherever they need to go, wherever they desire to go, throughout their time at the destination is accommodated. We are able to provide what they need so that they can see the different parts of the city, see the parts of the country, and not be restricted in their activities. High quality services. This is something where we talk a lot about training our workforce, training everybody in the different sectors to realize that there are individuals who are aging and have special needs, disabled and have special needs. And therefore, by having some sort of cultural training, sensitivity training, to make sure that our employees, our workers, our tourism representatives are able to recognize those needs and accommodate those needs and serve as a resource to know what is in the area, to know what is available in terms of accessible tourism, and to also know where they can refer people to in case they want to see certain things or experience different activities. Those high quality services are especially important because those are going to be the ones that truly influence the word of mouth, whether a person will come back, whether they'll tell other people, and whether or not they're very accommodating and welcoming. again, with a smile and being able to encourage them. When we talk about the activities and exhibits and attractions, these are the same types of things that people come to. There are many different cultural aspects that bring people to a destination, and therefore they should not be restricted. If they've come, they should be able to experience these as equally or equitably as anyone else. And therefore certain activities or provisions or equipment or structural designs may need to be included to ensure that they have this ability. And of course, when we talk about marketing and the booking systems and the websites and services, this is extremely important for promotion. Talking about making sure that you, on your websites, inform everybody that there are accessible tourism type infrastructures and abilities, whether or not there are certain attractions that are nearby, certain types of environmental structures that can accommodate where they want to go. Oftentimes these will be defined by what your destination is oftentimes known for, why the people are coming. And so therefore you can start to identify what it is that you can do to promote and market that you have accessible tourism. Keep in the back of your mind that accessibility is not necessarily a reason why people choose a destination, but a lack of accessibility is a reason why people will not choose a destination. Very important, and therefore that marketing becomes extremely important. So we talk about preparing the market, and this oftentimes starts with an awareness training and getting cross-sectional support and solidifying different partnerships and agreements. But what we have to do is prepare the market. Make sure that we have our high-quality services, and if they're not high quality, we improve them. Oftentimes through training, oftentimes through small changes that can be made in different areas that are frequented by older or disabled individuals. Oftentimes what these provisions will do is alleviate a traveler's stress or their dependence or their uncertainty when they get to the destination. Because if they're traveling and they don't know what to expect when they get there, they may not have as pleasurable of a time. They may not necessarily feel that they're being accommodated, and they might have a negative impact or a negative belief or perception about your destination. We talk about equipment and services because many of these can be done. They're existing, about transportation in the hotels, talking about toilets, talking about showers, talking about telephones and communication, making sure that they're all present and available. And the importance of the travel and the tourism agencies, all of those groups that can truly identify the needs of these individuals and link them to what they need, the resources, the services, the equipment before they arrive, preparing for them, or upon arrival, making sure that they can identify and link people to the services they need most. And we talk a lot about rights and rights of those disabled individuals, making sure that they are treated fairly and they have all of the different abilities and amenities and access. And we can get into that again, talking about social justice, human rights, talking just a lot about fairness and equity. So when we talk about the touristic offer, you can see in this image that there's many different ways that we can make an attraction accessible to a group of individuals. Starting here in the top corner, we see that exclusion, where there is an attraction and all of the people who are limited, either physically or cognitively, are then external. They cannot access the same type of information, the same services, the same amenities at the destination. Moving then to segregation. There are actual services, there are abilities for these individuals to experience the destination or the attraction, but it's separated somewhere that is different and isolated. Therefore, it's not a uniform type of interaction or experience for these individuals. And then we talk about integration. Integration meaning that it's still on site, but yet the entire attraction is not accommodating of people with disability. And while that is, in many ways, the best that some destinations or certain organizations can do, what we really strive for is the inclusion. And that is through the universal designs, making sure that anywhere that anybody can go, any traveler, that all travelers can also go to the same locations. They can see the same sights, and they can experience the same activities. And there's a lot of concerns. And this is great because I'm going to show you some of these photos after this so that you can see some of these in the good and the bad. Some of the common issues when talking about accessible tourism and meeting the needs of the people who are aging or disabled are about the inaccessible or only partially accessible websites. Talking a lot about the vision impaired or the hearing impaired, making sure that they can see all that is offered and make sure that they can learn more about the destination and coordinate their experience before getting there. This is another opportunity for the tourism sector to be able to market and promote their site, making sure that these people know what is available to them. When we talk about accessible airport transfer, this is a very important aspect, that it is the first impression. Oftentimes people land in a country and this is the first thing they see. And therefore having the equipment, making sure that they have the resources and the services is extremely important, because without this, they cannot necessarily get to the destination or get to their first place, like the hotel or conference center or anywhere else they need to go. Wheelchair accessibility, and especially those vehicles, are oftentimes limited. They're not always available, and when they are available, they're oftentimes not available to accommodate the volume of people needing them. When talking about well-adapted hotels, oftentimes these hotels do not have the equipment to accommodate these individuals, meaning that they don't have the right toilets or bathrooms, the shower facilities, the grab bars to make sure that people can sit properly and stand up properly. Oftentimes, when people talk about accessible tourism, they oftentimes just think about putting ramps. And that's it. As long as somebody in a wheelchair can use a ramp and get to the destination, that's enough. And that's not true. The staff, as I mentioned before, having a capable staff who can serve as a resource, making sure that they can really link those people to the services, and having reliable information about the accessible resources and equipment at the destination, but also making sure that those individuals know about it before coming to the destination. That is something that is oftentimes lacking, where people think that they come and they have certain accesses, but the reliability of the information they received is dated, or it's old, or it's inaccurate. And it's not just about your agency, but it's also about the surrounding agencies, the businesses, and the public transit. What is it that we really have available to these individuals? Restaurants, bars, and other facilities, as I just mentioned, toilets, streets and sidewalks. Of course, we don't want streets and sidewalks made of oftentimes cobblestone, or there are trees underneath and the root structure starts to break the concrete and create tripping hazards. There's oftentimes these different ways that we can think about the structure of the sidewalks and the streets, but we also have to think about the other types of equipment, like the signals that tell individuals who are hearing or vision impaired when to cross the road. Talking about making sure that there are structures where people know where to stand and when to cross and how much time to cross. Making sure that they really have all of those different types of information so that they're safe on the streets, not just because they're not tripping. And I'll show you some examples of these. So, some of the good and some of the not so good. I never say bad. There's always opportunities for improvement, but some of these are less than good. And I would like to thank my colleague, Erica Amorum, because between the two of us in our world travels, we've taken a lot of photographs. And so many of these are from our travels. I'm scared to push it more than once. Oh, it did it! Look at all those! You see them all? You need to go back? Okay, coming back. I knew it would catch up. Eventually. Don't pay attention. Here. A couple pictures, one from Israel, one from Brazil. And we see again, if an individual has physical functioning, certain types of needs or accommodations, they're not able, walking with a mobility device, you can see how some of these areas may be very challenging for them to access. These are certain examples. Again, we have to think about, well, what is it that we do? How is it that we change? Do we do a complete remodel or restructure of these structures? Or is it something that we can accept that certain people can't access them? And again, this becomes the choice of the destination, of the cities, of the municipalities. But oftentimes what we need to identify are these opportunities and then have conversations about ways that we can improve to make sure that there is universal access. Here in Portugal, we see very historic and beautiful gardens, but only accessible by stairs. Therefore, inherently, certain people with disabilities, especially physical functioning disabilities, cannot access all of the different areas of this attraction. I'm just going to wait. I don't know how long I'm going to wait, but I'm going to wait. Okay, bear with me, here we go. The Notre Dame Cathedral in France. We also see structural types of, certain types of structures that are more accommodating to people who are able-bodied and not able to, and maybe restrict people who have a physical functioning impairment. And so therefore the question becomes, and the certain talks about, do we put in an elevator? And where would we put that elevator? How do we preserve the destination? How do we preserve the culture, the heritage, and not necessarily just introduce a lot of other types of infrastructure or advancements? So there becomes a very big conversation that needs to be had about preservation, but also fairness and equality. So these are very complicated conversations that need to be had, but they need to be had across many different sectors. It's not just the tourism sector or the historic sector or the government. They have to be these conversations where we really talk about the investment of what can we do to attract people to our destination, make sure that when they're there, they have a wonderful time. And then, of course, they tell people when they come back, but also preserving what has been there for decades or centuries. What we see here, again, when we talk about water transportation, we see here that there is actually a bridge that has been built from the dock to the vessel, and that is extremely important, and it is great to have, but what we need to consider, just installing a ramp is not enough. We oftentimes have to think about the slope and the length of the ramp, so that individuals who need to be able to be steady on foot or have wheels, they do not travel too fast or have too many ways that they can gain too much speed. But also what we also see here is that the ramp comes to an end and the boat, there is still 2 feet to clear. So just because they come down the ramp does not mean that they can get onto the vessel without additional assistance. In Venice, we see again different types of stairs, different types of structures. There are certain of the bridges that have ramps, but these aren't necessarily spread out everywhere, all throughout. And so a person might have to travel a little extra distance. What we see in Chicago in the airport is that We see the visibility of the monitors being very high, and for somebody who is seated or has some other type of disability and requires to be seated, we see that they may not be able to see all of the information they need, but at the same time, having a variety of levels of information can be more accommodating, because if it's too low and crowds form, these individuals may not be able to see the information. And also, when we think about visual impairment, people may need to be closer or have larger text. Here we see an elevator, very traditional, where this could be the same with mothers with strollers and carriages. But we see that if individuals need other people to accompany them, there's not a lot of space in the elevator. So sometimes we have to think about the size of our elevator shafts, our ability to accommodate more than just a few people at one time. Here, as we saw on our walk and tour yesterday, we see that the downtown area here in the city has been making great strides to be able to include not only the stairs, but the ramps and a lot of different access points to this newly revitalized area. We see on the public transit systems making space for individuals who have wheelchairs or other accommodations. We see this in a couple different places, but this is an important consideration when creating new services or being able to restructure the existing transportation, is that can you accommodate, can you integrate the space for people who need that extra space? And you see all the grab bars there in Spain. When talking about telephones, you see the different levels of telephones, so that they're not all high at chest level, sometimes lower for those people who are seated. Making sure that there are voice amplifying so that it can be louder for the hearing impaired. Making sure that they have all of the different access that they could possibly, oftentimes also in Braille, making sure that the vision impaired can operate these materials as well. Designated areas in the airports or in any of the bus stations, so that it's not just that it's available, but it's known. People who need these services can then identify them quickly and rapidly and get to them as quickly as they need. And so I'll see if it does, but here I might have skipped a few things, but again, proper signage is something that we always talk about, making sure that individuals know that if there are certain resources, equipment, certain areas that they need to go to, that they know where, and that they have that information, and that they're not guessing. Or there needs to be that trained staff, somebody who's a representative who can inform them of where they can go, and they can answer their questions and lead them and guide them. As we see, it's not just in the cities, it's also wherever the destination may be. Here's a great example in Canada, where we see that even the outdoor facilities are accommodating and making sure that they can serve those individuals with mobile impairments. Different aspects, we see even those with parking, those with transportation. This could be at any location, destination, wherever it is throughout the destination city or the municipality. We see in the elevators and also the telephones, we see the portable toilet facilities and also water fountains, many different options, many different ways that can have very big impacts on these people who need extra services, and making sure that they're all inclusive and able to access all things comfortably. Again, looking at the space, the ramps, the grab bars, making sure that the different colors, as you notice down in the corner you see yellow, making sure that there are visual cues as to where the start or exit of an accessible type of equipment or structure may be, but also noting that some of these have special textures or raised parts that can be for individuals with visual impairment, so that they can feel where the beginning of an area is, but also so that if in fact somebody is moving on a wheel, they can also feel when they need to stop or even help to slow them down in some instances. A lot of different opportunities. For those of you in beach or other types of resorts, many different types. And again, apologies, but it skipped through. Here's where I was talking about the different roadways and intersections, places that can be very dangerous for people who are aging, moving slower, or moving with mobility aids. And so we see again with the colors, with the different textures, so that people can feel and also observe when they need to stop or where they need to stand, and also the different signals, making sure that they truly have not only visual but audio, so that they can understand when and know when to cross. Here's a wonderful promotion campaign. For some, this is Mount Everest. And it's very true, and it's very well taken. There's a lot of different reasons and a lot of different ways that we can change our environments and we can be more accommodating. And the question just becomes, to what extent can we? To what extent can we invest in this initial investment to get a return on that investment later? Again, accessibility is not necessarily a reason why people will come to a destination, but that lack of accessibility is definitely a reason they will choose not to come to that destination. And there we almost go. Again, talking about adequately serving this population, and we know that these activities don't happen in isolation. It's not just one aspect of a destination, of a community. It's many different multidisciplines working together. And we need to have that multi-sectoral buy-in, making sure that everybody is on board and will do their part so that not just certain organizations or entities, agencies, certain areas are accessible, that the community is accessible, and those connections between the locations are accessible. And we talk about having those coalitions form, making partnerships, creating the protocols, the referrals, the communication channels, and doing this before you have individuals needing these services, making sure that we've talked about these needs and services and coordination of the services before there are the needs, so that we can identify where the challenges may be and how we can change to improve any gaps in our service. And we see there's many different organizations and entities. You see many that you are very familiar with, but sometimes we have to think about the non-traditional. We oftentimes think of fire and hospital and EMS and police, but sometimes what we don't think about are those other reasons why people have come to a destination, like for schools or faith-based organizations. Just because somebody comes to a destination doesn't mean they don't want to engage in all aspects, not just those in the most touristic areas. And so here I conclude with some recommendations of things we can all do, talking about expanding the collaboration and the partnerships, making sure that if we think we have a good plan, we make sure that we're asking all individuals representing all entities, all sectors of the community to come and provide their insight, but also to give their support so that we can have a coordinated approach to be sure that we accommodate all of these individuals who may be aging and all of these individuals who may have certain types of impairments. We need to raise more awareness, and there's been great awareness and great strides being made. There are a lot of different organizations dedicated to just accessible tourism and making sure that the equality issues are starting to be raised and brought to the forefront in the communications. Identifying and making sure that we have a trained and skilled tourism sector, making sure that these individuals know what to expect, who to expect, and how to serve them best. Make sure that we have all the equipment, make sure we have all the resources, but also serve as a resource to be able to link them to what they need. And then, of course, talking about improving the information so that the promotion and the marketing can be improved, so that people know what the destination can offer and how they can experience the entire destination, not just portions. And then, as I always recommend, there's a need for more behavioral profiling, to understand a little bit more about the characteristics of the aging and the disabled people coming to our area, so that we can learn more about who they are, what they want to do when they get to us, and how we can serve them and meet their needs. It's this kind of market research that can be very important when making sure that your accessible tourism efforts are meeting the needs and the demands of the people who need them most. It's also great to mention that just because these changes are made for the travelers or with the travelers in mind, it is actually the entire community that benefits. Because many of these individuals, whether traveling or not, are aging and they do have disabilities. And so that's what I'd like to leave you with. I appreciate it very much. I am around to answer or talk to anybody as the conference continues. I appreciate it. Sorry for the technical difficulties.